Hi, welcome to Lecture 3, Part 2 on the Marketing Mix and Customer Buying Behavior Analytics. In the first part of the video, we looked at the marketing mix modeling and what are the variables involved. In this Part 2, we're going to be focusing on customer segmentation, targeting, and positioning. What is heuristics? Now, before we want to talk about marketing mix modeling, the difference between marketing mix modeling and STP, we need to understand that in marketing mix modeling, a lot of the data that we do are basically the analytics that we do are basically more on the regression, as well as we have a hypothesis involved in terms of understanding that we want to try and prove certain relationships happen, especially when we use regression. But in STP, most of the time, it's all about understanding what patterns emerge in our data. So we go back to the understanding of heuristics. Now, heuristics comes from a Greek word called I find or I discover. These are basically very quick techniques that helps us to solve a problem quickly when the classical methods of regressions are too slow or basically too inaccurate. Sometimes we want to find an approximate solution where we don't have a hypothesis that we're trying to prove or solve when the classical methods fail to find any exact solution. So this is where heuristic comes into play. The problem is that there are a lot of data, and a lot of people use these data and they don't even know where these sources of data come from. And this is actually a problem that you will find when we talk about big data later on in one of the video series. There is also inefficient use of the data and the analysis that is used on these data, and the ineffective translation of this analysis to strategy that actually works for the company. So the goal is when we find and extract all these data to get a pattern so that we can accurately report on what has happened in the past, analyze the present intellectually, and to build models that we can predict the future accurately. So breaking down the population will help you to understand the characteristics and position your value. Now, in order for us to do this, we have to think about understanding the STP, or in marketing, we call it the segmentation, targeting, and positioning. So with segmentation, we're actually trying to break the market into smaller, meaningful groups and developing profiles that results in segments that we understand. And then once we find out what are these segments, we have to then recognize what makes these segments valuable in terms of targeting the characteristics that make these segments very, very attractive to the company. So evaluating the attractiveness of each of the segments. Once we know that, then we can position our product or service based on the target importance. That's where we select, develop, and communicate the chosen concept of our product or brand that will meet these targets at where they said that they are most attracted to. So imagine if there's no market segmentation for a market with a lot of different types of people, ages, and adults. How would you segment this kind of a market? Well, we can either segment them by generation in terms of their ages, young, middle, or old, or we can segment them by gender, male or female. There are many ways that we can segment data, but the most important thing is that when we choose our segmentation strategy, we must make sure that the cluster must be of similar characteristics, internally homogeneous and externally heterogeneous. Also try to make sure that when we do our segmentation that we do not have too small of a number within each segment or too large of a number, to always balance out as much as we can the ratio of the number of people within each of the segments so that it is meaningful and manageable. Now, also when it comes to clustering and segmentation, we also want to make sure that we do not have too many segments until we cannot come up with meaningful marketing strategies. But at the same time, we must also have enough segments to find differentiating factors. And this is where the differentiating factors must be very strong when we do targeting. Targeting helps us to identify the best target segments for using decision tree. Now, a decision tree is just basically you have a root node that breaks down into decisions all the way down to what we call the terminal node at the very bottom, or we call it the leaf node. So, for example, we want to determine what kind of people buy sports car in this particular tree. We see that the people who buy sports cars are usually people who are not married, but if they are married, if they are, who are over, not over 30 years, which are the young segment, but if they are young segment, then they are, if they're the older segment, then they are usually the non-married. So you actually have two segments that tell you if or who will actually buy the sports car, which are people who are over 30, which are people who are under 30, and who are people who are over 30 and not married. Then, once we know what are the characteristics that are most attractive to these targets, we can then start to position our product or service using perceptual mapping or correspondence analysis to understand how consumers see your product in terms of their characteristics. So, for example, like if you look at Tylenol or Mortin. Now, this is products of aspirin products. So they say it's gentle and it's good for children. Now, just go back to our first lecture where we looked at brand positioning and brand equity. Understanding that brand equity, now we can position our products or service. So now, what are some of the key takeaways putting part 1 and part 2 of lecture 3 together? Marketing mix modeling is comprised usually of base, standard non-marketing factors like the GDP, and then our pricing, our distribution, as well as the seasonality. Incremental marketing factors like the above the line, below the line, and the combination, which is what we call the through the line, as well as other factors resulting in marketing efforts. So things like the halo effect and also the cannibalization effect as well. We also have to take into consideration new marketing emerging factors like social media trends, for example, that need to be considered when we do marketing mix modeling. Marketing mix modeling can be modeled using univariate pattern in single variable, and also bivariate relationships between the variables, and regression, which is a combination of these variables together. And then finally, if we understand STP, we can use STP analytics to help us find an approximate solution when the classical methods like regression find or fail to find any exact solution that we want. Now, for the tutorial for this particular lecture, this is where I would like you to explore the understanding of heuristics and STP. So let's start out easy by going through segmentation methodology using cluster analysis or two-step cluster by looking at the video and following the steps with the data sets given, as well as run through the correspondence analysis methodology using perceptual mapping, correspondence analysis, again using the data set, and also following the video in the technical video that I provided for you. So go through this to understand how to create proper segments as well as proper perceptual mapping. Additionally, I would like you to read the following guide on marketing mix modeling, just to get an idea of what marketing mix modeling is. It is actually, this particular article is a much more larger aspect of what I've covered in this lecture. And for your academic article, do read the academic article on clustering Spanish alcoholic beverages shoppers to focus marketing strategies. Now, once you've read the academic article, please answer the questions comparing and contrast the classical regression and the STP methodologies for marketing analytics. List down as many as you can new customer knowledge that can be extracted from data by combining both methods. So what you need to do is, if you think about putting two methods together or three methods together, think about what are the methods you're putting together and what are the new knowledge that you can derive out from putting those two methodologies or more than two methodologies together. The next lecture, we're going to consider new product development, where we're going to go through the 9 steps of new product development and how this can help us with creating better customer insights. So thank you very much and see you in the next lecture.